What's the Church of Scientology so afraid of?
This is
SPTV.
Welcome back, everybody, for a little bit more SPTV, where every day is one step closer to the total collapse of Scientology. I'm joined once again today by Natalie Webster. How's it going, Natalie?
Fabulous. Another cult-free day, so it's all good over here.
That's awesome. We have a really interesting subject to discuss today. Do you want to get it started?
Yes, we are going to have a conversation about perfectionism and Scientology's role in that, how Scientology contributes to, really a deadly level of perfectionism and those habits and how it actually destroys lives in Scientology. And I found it very interesting because when I first thought about because I kept seeing reference to perfectionism, and somebody actually asked me a question in the comments that kind of prompted this thought process for me, which was, why do so many ex-Scientologists say 100%? Yes, 100%. That type of just it's perfect. And I realized I never noticed that, but I know that I say it a lot. And so I thought, well, it could just be a coincidence. So I started looking more into, well, what is perfectionism? And the more I read it and went down this hole, I was like, oh my gosh, it really cracks the code on some things in Scientology and how people are controlled. Because some of the common traits with perfectionism I read are like a fear of failure, self-criticism, obsessive thinking, reassurance seeking, unattainable goal setting, which is something that's done a ton, Aaron, as you know, in Scientology.
Yes, that's one of the things that jumped out at me when I looked at your kind of outline for this subject that you want to talk about this evening. Is Scientology is crazy about setting unrealistic standards, unrealistic goals. And it's one of these things where a Scientologist would immediately and vehemently disagree with you if you said that to them, because setting unrealistic targets is one of the things L. Ron Hubbard said you're never supposed to do. And yet it's one of these real cognitive dissonance things in Scientology where you go, wait a second. As Scientologists, we all convinced ourselves that's not what we were doing. That's what we were doing all day long. That's why everyone's always in a panic. It's always a rush, because you're trying to attain something that is unobtainable. And so the way you convince yourself that you're at least getting close is you're just being very, 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 very busy all the time.
Absolutely.
And that's only necessary because of the completely unrealistic goals that are being set.
Yeah. You cannot really win because it's a culture of what have you done for me lately? If you have a good week and your statistics are up, well, that doesn't last very long because then it's right back to the what have you done for me lately? Now your target needs to be this much higher. And it leads to just this really, you're afraid to be vulnerable. And in Scientology, think of all the things that we were raised doing and trained to do, Aaron, like the verbatim drills, where we had to take pages sometimes of L. Ron Hubbard information policies and auditing procedures and be able to word for word recite it. Really long pages. There was one that was really long. I did it on the course where you learn to do solo auditing on yourself. I forget which one it was, but you got to learn all the somethings or the something. And I obviously was
listing and nulling.
Yes.
The laws of listing and nulling.
Exactly. Over
That's
and over.
Right.
And that thing was what? How many pages? Do you remember? I don't. But it was ridiculous.
I forget how many laws of listing and nulling there are. I want to say 39, but I'm pulling that totally just out of nowhere. If Louis Repetto is in the live chat, how many laws of listing and nulling are there? And the laws of listing and nulling is just a phrase that describes a procedure that you do in certain kinds of Scientology auditing sessions. And L. Ron Hubbard said these laws are like the most important things, and you had to memorize them verbatim. And there was many things like that. And in order to pass that particular exercise, you'd have to sit there in a chair in front of a wall saying these things verbatim. And it's if you even hesitated slightly on a word, it would be a flunk.
Yeah. And you start over, regardless of how long. You could mess up on the very last word of something that's even maybe 7 pages. And you go back and you have to start over. It's over and over and over again. And anytime you do something wrong when you're training or on a course in Scientology, you're told flunk, flunk, flunk just over and over again. It has to be perfect. The wording around training is you need to be 100% flawless, flubless, without error. They literally say perfection.
Mm-hmm. They literally do. And then they get Scientologists to convince themselves that they've achieved that when it's not something that can be achieved. It's just
Exactly.
ridiculous. But you get trained into thinking that striving for perfection is a virtue, and always demanding perfection is a virtue, and convincing yourself you are perfect is a virtue, when in reality these are somewhat destructive concepts.
Yeah. And is it no wonder that people like Tom Cruise and David Miscavige think that they are these perfect people, these individuals who feel that they need to be worshiped pretty much with the level of demanded respect that's showed to them. It's this just belief that you can really be completely perfect that way. Even in the training in Scientology, it's 100% when you take an exam. You get 100%, or you go and you have to relearn the things that you got wrong on there. But it's that constant standard. Now, Aaron, you were a course room supervisor, so you were someone who you were over the training of people in Scientology. I mean, from your perspective, I mean, what do you think about this as it relates to Scientology training?
I think this idea that Scientology training should be done with this goal of attaining perfection in mind is something that really came into play most strongly in the first golden age of tech evolution in 1996. David Miscavige had decided no one had ever trained properly as a Scientology auditor before. He implemented these new drills, this new training system to train uniformly consistent, perfect auditors in any Scientology organization anywhere in the world. That was at least his stated goal.
Yeah.
And we all convinced ourselves that that is what this entire paradigm accomplished, which was immediately contradicted by the fact that the world's top technical people still had to go train in Clearwater, Florida. And you go, but why? Why would they still have to train in Clearwater, Florida, if this whole new system of training was specifically so that all auditors would be trained exactly the same way everywhere in the world? Now, I'm not sure I really directly answered your question. I feel like, well, see, it is an impossible standard. So if you truly were trying to attain that standard, nobody would ever finish a course.
No, it's
And this
crazy
is actually
making.
one of the reasons why it took people years to finish the professional e-meter course, because all of the supervisors, of which I was one of them, who had trained in Clearwater, Florida on this first golden age of tech evolution, it was instilled in us that perfection was a more desirable goal than just having a lot of like really good auditors. Like having one really perfect auditor would be better than having 100 really good, only merely really good auditors.
Yeah.
And it actually resulted in Scientology statistics collapsing around the world because nobody was finishing this professional e-meter course, and almost nobody was moving on to train as professional auditors. And if you believe in Scientology, training people as professional auditors is supposed to be really what everything is there for.
Exactly.
And this idea of perfection, which came directly from David Miscavige, this idea that, and ironically, I keep going back to this. Ironically, it completely contradicts what L. Ron Hubbard actually said, which is quantity, quality, viability. First, you get as much done as possible, quantity, and then you try to get as much quality as possible, and you have to jockey these back and forth to achieve a desirable level of viability. Now, I don't mention the L. Ron Hubbard policy because I think it matters. I don't give a damn about L. Ron Hubbard policy, but Scientologists are supposed to. And since I was like a brand new, little staff member, I cared, interestingly enough, I cared much more about what David Miscavige said and thought and believed, actually more than I did about what L. Ron Hubbard wrote. And I kind of deferred to whatever David Miscavige's interpretation was of what L. Ron Hubbard wrote. David Miscavige was the one that was right.
Oh, yeah.
And so this idea that perfection is the only virtue, in a weird way, I was even blind to the fact that this idea wasn't viable. it actually prevented us from accomplishing what we thought we were accomplishing, which is trying to train a lot of auditors.
Mhm.
And so this idea of perfection, but it's weird because I'm saying it as if it was this destructive thing, and that's only something I'm able to say in hindsight. At the time, I thought it was extremely virtuous.
Yeah. That's the whole branding around it and what you're convinced of in Scientology, with even L. Ron Hubbard saying, we rather have you dead than incapable. And that gets said over and over and over to Scientologists, being anything less than perfect. Like we rather just have you dead. And think about the orientation film, which I heard is not being, last time I heard it wasn't even being shown. This is a film you would watch as your first point of contact in Scientology. You go into an organization and they would have you watch this film called Orientation. And they had to pull it because the guy who starred in it, he ended up leaving Scientology.
Larry Anderson.
Yeah. He reoriented himself and left. But in that film, at the end of the film, and keep in mind, people watching this are not Scientologists. Scientologists have to watch it, but it is designed for people as their first introduction into Scientology. And at the end, the host is talking about how, you could leave. You could leave right now. Don't buy a book. If you don't do a service or you don't do a book, you could leave right now. And that's your choice. That's an alternative, walking out of the Scientology building, right? But what was it he said? He said,
you could also jump off a bridge or put a bullet in your brain or something like that.
That's right. You can also dive off a bridge or blow your brains out.
Yes. Yes.
To new people, like even for David Miscavige, that's like, dude, that's really bad. This is horrible positioning.
And the fact that guy ended up leaving Scientology is just too perfect.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, doing that scene and having to say that. And what was he thinking? I wonder if he ever talked about that. I know that Larry Anderson was vocal some years ago about his time in Scientology. I would love to find out and know, like, what was that like for you to have to say that, knowing this was a starting point? Because I saw it as a Scientologist. And even then I was like, what the hell is this?
I would love to do a chat with Larry Anderson. If anyone out there knows Larry or knows how to get in touch with Larry, you can shoot me an email at growingupinscientology@gmail.com. That would be amazing.
But I love that they had to just ditch the entire film, which I think was a good thing because it was just like absolutely horrible. There's also in growing up in Scientology and being in this organization or training in Scientology, this is for public too. People who've never been on staff or been in the SEA organization, this level of perfection when you're training as a Scientologist applies across the board. And coming out of that, I feel like it's part of at least it was for me, part of the process of really shedding that cult culture. I was not even realizing how much I was still having that mentality of perfection of I didn't think I did, because not everything I did I felt needed to be done perfectly right. But some of the things that I read about with perfectionism is you don't value time off. You don't value things if there's no point to it, if there's no end result or product. And that was me for years. And that is one that I still struggle with. Tony will say, oh, let's do this, whatever it is. I'll be like, well, but why would we do that? What's the end result of that? Why would we just lay down and look at stars? And that is something I love so much about my relationship with him. He was never in Scientology. We've been together 10 years. And in the beginning, that's so much of what we did. And it helped me a lot realize, like, well, wait a minute. It's actually enjoyable to lay out and look at the stars on the roof. It's fun because he's so spontaneous in these ways and wanted to do all these fun things. And I was still holding on to that robotic mentality of, well, what's the product? What's the end result? Hard to have fun.
Yes. I feel like I don't do that so much anymore, but I think it is so ingrained in me that I'm probably not aware of the ways in which I still do that. It's just such an important part of the culture. And it's funny because it comes from David Miscavige. He's the one who pushes this idea of perfection, and yet he's the one who keeps having to fix his own mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't admit they're his mistakes. He blames them on other people.
Exactly. That's just the irony in it. And I've seen over the years, I just didn't know how to describe this kind of phenomena sometimes with people who've left Scientology. Not everyone, of course, where it's also hard sometimes to let go of that moral code, especially in the C organization, where you're telling all of these people that you can barely touch each other until you get married. These are people who are doing stressful jobs, and it's crazy making. And then when you get in trouble for it, right? You're completely punished for it. And people see that you're punished for it and they think that that will stop people from doing it. And it never seems to work out that way. And there's so much judgment around it. And one of the things with perfectionism too is not being comfortable with making mistakes, your own mistakes and that of other people too. Not just being like coming down as this hammer. And in Scientology, it was always that, well, you have to apply more pressure on that person than their reactive mind can, than their case can. And that
That's
created some
right.
weird things.
Oh, I forgot about that, that principle
Mhm.
that people's reactive minds are exerting a certain amount of pressure on them. But if you can exert more pressure on them than the reactive mind is, then you can get them to do the things you need them to do. Wow.
Yeah.
That
Which
is such a manipulative, such a tool of manipulation. That is amazing.
and
I forgot about that one.
that sums up like the Sea Org right there. You know, that was constantly the thing with everyone, whatever you did, whether you're doing a course or you're doing a job, and these ridiculous expectations. And when the expectations are ridiculous and unreasonable, then things get weird.
Yeah.
They get
How
weird for
about this
people.
one? Look at this. Anand says this obsessive perfection leads to massive egos and narcissism as well. Yeah, because there's going to be those people who, I guess, on the one hand, maybe you have people who are always have this feeling of inferiority because they never feel like they're able to achieve what they're expected to achieve. But then on the flip side, you've got people who have convinced themselves that they have achieved
Yeah.
that perfection.
Yeah.
They're totally happy with themselves because they think they are perfect.
Mhm.
And that's terrible.
Yeah, you see it often in families. I know my grandpa dad was pretty much like the cult leader for our family, and nothing he did was wrong. There was nothing he could do that was wrong. No one questioned it. And it's like that in Scientology. Once L. Ron Hubbard says it should be this way, then it's that way. There's no discussion about it. There's no nothing else about it. And if you don't want to comply, you have misunderstood words or Overton withholds. There's things that you're doing and you're being reasonable, which again in Scientology is not a good thing, but outside of Scientology, it is. Being reasonable or
Right.
open-minded.
Right. It also seems to me, well, here, this one from Remby. Amazing topic, hitting close to home for me. Finally catching up on YouTube and caught this live. Happy New Year and all the best to you both. Happy New Year, Renby. So this idea of perfection coming from David Miscavige being pushed so heavily by him, I think the entire organization has kind of taken on this personality. Like it's why I have to imagine it's one of the reasons why it's not acceptable to ever say that the reason something isn't going right is because the direction from the top was incorrect to begin with.
Mhm.
Like that's not even ever an option. Management, David Miscavige, when management still existed, but now we're just mean David Miscavige, has never once said, we are changing course because the initial course was incorrect. Never has such a thing ever been said.
No, not
And
unless
yet
they're
when you
blaming
look
it
at,
on someone in the past.
that's right. That's right. It's always blaming it on someone else in the past. But when you look at the most successful giant corporations in the world, none of these corporations, none of their management structures, none of the, what do they call it, the C-suite executives, none of them have this persona of like, I can never be questioned. We can never admit we're wrong. Like even the biggest, most famous business figures you might imagine, Steve Jobs or whatever, these people are imperfect. And they don't pretend to be otherwise. But not only does David Miscavige pretend to be perfect, he pretends that all of management, like it's weird because I was about to say he pretends that all of management is perfect and cannot be criticized. But he's the first one to criticize all the other members of management, just not himself.
Yeah. When he's the one that's doing it, he's the one that's creating the problems and then thinks that he's also coming up with a solution for it at the same time. It's like you created the problem and now there's this solution for it, for a problem that never existed. The same way they shoot themselves in the foot with creating problems with non-Scientologists or Scientologists who want to leave over and over and over again. It just has trickled down so much that it's definitely this consistent theme. And I mean, really got me thinking about people who leave Scientology, but these are things too that across the board you can experience growing up or in your life, and then start having these feelings of sometimes I read people like it's hard for them to get started because they don't have everything they need, or it's not going to be perfect. I remember once my daughter, when she was little, they said that in school that she wouldn't write. And when they asked her why she wouldn't write, and she just straight up told them, because I can't do it perfectly. And it's something that she had to work on.
Wow.
Although she was technically raised in Scientology. So it still affects that. But I feel like even people not in Scientology, that this might resonate, because I think we catch ourselves sometimes doing it. And the more and more, Aaron, the longer I've been away from Scientology, and I think really for me, this last year, 2 years especially the last 2 years of having some things happen that just were not in my control at all, was incredibly humbling. And got me to see too that it's still okay. There's things you can only do what you can do. And not expecting people to be perfect or do something perfectly is such a gift. Giving them grace. That's something that I've gotten multiple times, being forgiving about something, when you can, if you're really feeling it. It just, in Scientology, that's so non-existent. No one says, you tried your hardest, Aaron.
That's right.
A for effort. None of that exists.
Nope. Hell no. That doesn't exist at all. I mean, even if you're going for, let's say you're going for a highest ever statistic for the current week, it's almost, and let's say you almost make it. Almost making it and failing to make it is considered even worse than not even coming close.
Yeah.
Because if you almost make it, they go, really? You couldn't have just done a little bit more?
Yeah.
Really? How out ethics of you? You could have just tried a little bit harder and gotten that stat up. No one's ever going to come along and say, you know what? You worked your guts out this week. You should be proud. Take a win. You did a great job. No, that's not how it works.
Mm-mm. No, never. And if this is a great example of something it's a small thing in Scientology, but it's such a big thing. And raising children with that point of view in that environment, I mean, it's another thing that just breeds the human out of us, that empathy and compassion. Because you can't have any if you have this crazy expectation of how people should behave, and just not being able to just let it go. And hey, maybe somebody made a mistake. They made a bad choice. But if they're willing to own it and take responsibility for it, and even if they don't, what is that to me? That's not my business. That having to, because even Tom Cruise said, we're the only ones that can help. If there's a car accident, you better hope Tom Cruise is nearby if you get into a crash, because per him, he is the only one who can help. Him and Scientologists are the only ones who can do anything.
Speaking of which, Tom Cruise is in town right now.
In Clearwater?
Yeah.
What's he doing?
He went to a movie at the Oldsmar Theater. I think he went to a Tampa Bay Lightning game last night or the day before. And I don't know, maybe I'm guessing he's here for the Flag New Year's Eve event.
Could be. Is his girlfriend, the new girlfriend, the Russian girlfriend with him? Are they still together?
I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen her in any photos. His son, Connor, is with him in the photos that I've seen, but Connor lives here, so that's not a big surprise. But yeah, I mean, the second biggest being in this sector of the Galactic Federation. It's always interesting when little Tommy's in town.
Exactly. See what he does. Where does he go?
Such a big being in such a little package.
But we know he's not having any fun because remember, he would love to frolic and do all kinds of stuff, but he can't because he's busy.
He wants to romp. He wants to romp. I guess
Tom
he was.
romp.
We're gonna pretend like he wasn't romping at the Tampa Bay Lightning game, though. While the Sea Org members were slaving away, he was romping.
Exactly. It's like he thinks people can't see him, right? Makes that whole big speech about not taking time off. He's just like so focused on expanding Scientology and saving the planet. And then here he is at a game. Here he is. No one sees it. It's like he just walks around, thinks if he does this, like my grandchild, then we can't see him.
One of the thing on this thing of perfection is I feel like, because L. Ron Hubbard did talk about perfection, particularly about FLAG being perfect. So FLAG is the biggest Scientology organization in the world. But back in the day, FLAG was a ship. FLAG was the flagship Apollo, where L. Ron Hubbard was at sea for many years. And his marketing propaganda was that Scientology tech was perfect on the ship. It was perfect at FLAG. And FLAG, one of its catchphrases is FLAG is the mecca of technical perfection. And you go, okay. But the point that I want to make on this is Scientology says that Scientology technology works 100% of the time when applied 100% standardly. Yeah. And so you actually now have an interesting little purpose for introducing this idea of perfection, because it gives you a tool, an easy mechanism to explain away failures of Scientology, because nothing is ever perfect. Mm-hmm. You can always find some little thing that was wrong, and those things are used as this is why it didn't work. It's never just, well, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe this doesn't work on everyone. That's not on the table. That's not a possibility. No. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that because it does give some utility to the idea of perfectionism as sort of a catch-all explanation for why someone was not happy with the Scientology that they got.
Yeah, exactly. Because it also, to your point, raises the bar as a public person, seeing the propaganda of what you're going to get out of these different levels that you do. And when it's not that, or when it's less than perfect, or even when you're being trained on the training side, and you know that you're doing something and you're doing it a way that's not perfect, that then you're self-conscious about it and think that you're the only one, or at least I did. I remember thinking, okay, I'm not doing this perfectly. I must be the only one.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't think that's true. It's all part of the lie and part of the control.
Yeah. And it also creates this atmosphere where people are constantly, is kind of repeating what you just said, constantly lying to themselves.
Yes. And each other.
Yeah.
Themselves
Instead of just accepting what is obvious to most people, that perfection is neither attainable nor necessary. And instead of just going, hey, we do our stuff as good as we can do it, and we strive for the best, and maybe we can always get better, or maybe we're going to hit a level that is just sustainable. But let's just not just walk around lying to each other, pretending that we're doing something perfectly. And we shouldn't have to lie to each other. That shouldn't be the expectation. Mm-hmm. And yet that is the expectation.
And I think it continues on often. I know it did for me for a very long time, this idea that I could never admit when I was hurting, physically or otherwise, if I wasn't feeling well, because you just can't be vulnerable like that in Scientology. And because there still was this feeling of that, well, it shouldn't be like that for me. That feeling of you're going to get in trouble for being sick, or you're going to get in trouble for not doing something perfectly. And it wasn't until I intentionally started lowering the bar for myself, because that's kind of how I started out for me. When I joined the Sea organization, I joined the lowest possible organization I could do, lowering the bar and doing really well there, not as much pressure as other areas. And as you go through Scientology, it just pushes you so extremely hard to do something constantly at a higher level, but not in a way that you're still not doing anything. And that's a frustrating thing about it. There's still nothing to show for it. Yet that's the lie. And then we go and tell each other, oh yeah, I just got back from LA doing my next step. It's absolutely wonderful, because it has to be, because that's what's expected of us. And I think that's part of the mind control, is they tell you right out, here's the result of this level that you should be getting on the lower levels, or even on the upper levels. This is the phenomena that you should be experiencing. And so you already have this idea that that's how it should be. But you can't have a different experience from that, because if you do, it's going to cost you more money.
Yes. I'm thankful that my Scientology experience did not include that component of being a public and having to having the feeling that you needed to check your own thoughts and actions, because the consequence would be it was going to cost you a lot of money. I mean, in some respects, staff members and Sea Org members, your mistakes cost you in other ways. But I feel like if I had to constantly worry about money, that's a unique form of stress that public Scientologists have to experience.
Yeah, unless you're a Sea Org member where they, got credit cards in your name and jacked them up. But for
Yes.
but for the most part, yes, it is mainly the Scientology public who deal like that. I remember once when I was out of the Sea organization, I was full blown Scientologist. Though it was towards the end of that, my husband and I, we would take the kids. We would go to movies often on the weekend, especially in the wintertime, was something that everybody could do. And one time I remember we were driving back and we knew that the International Association of Scientologists were in town, and we knew they might be showing up. So we kind of ease up our street, and we lived in a cul-de-sac at that time. And I looked down and I can see the car at our house. And I just said, keep driving. We didn't go home. We were prepared to check into a hotel to avoid the International Association of Scientologists and the people who were going to come at us for money. And I know of a Scientologist fairly high up on the bridge to total freedom. And he did once check into a hotel and not go home because they were at his house and kept showing up to get money from him.
Wow.
If your best people are doing this to avoid you, maybe you got to rethink. But no.
Wow.
And no one knows
Here's
the
a
other people are
comment.
always doing it.
Here's a comment from Dave Owens. It seems like the shame culture of Scientology oozes over into life afterwards. I can see why folks leaving struggle so much just living life.
Yeah.
It's very true.
It's letting go of that. Some of the things that I read too, like that's supposed to be helpful, is gaining awareness of like what your thoughts and your tendencies are, not letting yourself just go down that rabbit hole of negative self-talk, and challenging your thoughts with actual facts, which is something we were not allowed to do. If you didn't get your statistics up, if you didn't do all these things you were supposed to do and you were expected to do, the world was going to end. It was constant like that. And it's really hard to leave that mentality. At least it was for me. Even leaving Scientology, even years down the road, just having that feeling of anxiety in my chest about not getting something done. And it's taken a lot of time of working with other people, never in Scientology, who are validating, who are encouraging, and who also don't have that expectation that it would be perfect. It's such a beautiful thing. And it definitely helps.
Dan Mosqueda, Aaron, you haven't worked in corporate America. I've had several CEOs who were always right, or people who are convinced they are the smartest person in the room. They suck up all the oxygen. Well, I have worked in corporate America, and I wasn't making a comment on all CEOs. I'm mainly thinking of ones who run large publicly traded companies and are answerable to the investment bank analysts, the Wall Street analysts, and the shareholders in their quarterly calls. And, these people are confronted in public forums every quarter, especially if they've failed to meet the consensus of the revenue projections and all that kind of stuff. And you could never survive as a CEO of a publicly traded company if, in response to questions about poor performance, you were never wrong. You never made a mistake. I mean, but anyway, I get your point, Dan. Yeah, I do get your point. Let's see. Scarlett Phalanges. Perfectionism plus ADHD, which I have as an unholy duo. Never start anything in case it's not perfect.
Yeah, it's a lot to overcome. Letting yourself be comfortable with mistakes was another thing. And like I said, that's what I know really helped me. I would intentionally not make my bed because I needed to make my bed. And I love having my bed made. That is my preference. But it was more than that. It was, I had to do it. If I didn't do it, I was stressed out about it, like a little bit of OCD about it. But I don't think it was true OCD because I was able to, I think real like diagnosable OCD is a lot more serious than what I'm talking about. But being able to not make my bed and be okay with it because I needed to be okay with what I saw as making mistakes or not doing something to the level that I could do it. And it's been very healing to be kind of like messing up here and there.
Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting one from Anon. Also, from a spiritual perfection aspect, Alex Jensch thought he could handle his sickness spiritually without medication. Alex was my friend, and he used to brag about being able to handle massive amounts of alcohol without getting drunk. This mentality is dangerous. Very interesting. And also, what would be the point of drinking massive amounts of alcohol without getting drunk? I'm not sure. But let's see. Chi Chakana. Happy Xenu year. Curious regarding teen Sea Org life. Was there a cool crowd? How did teens rebel, ditch and smoke and drink, hairstyle, etc., that you did or saw? What was your experience with this?
Well, for me, it was not so much. I think how teens rebelled was like what I did is I would sneak up to my room, and I was married at 17. So we had our own room that connected to a bathroom that we shared with another couple in the Sea Org. And I would sneak up there sometimes just to listen to music and just have some chill time. I'm talking like 10 minutes, maybe at most 20 minutes if I could be missing for that long. This didn't go on for hours. That was one of the ways. Kids in the Sea Org, it's not rebellious to smoke because they just allow it. I saw so many underage kids who smoked cigarettes who were in the Sea Org because they're just allowed. I mean, one girl, I remember she was 16 years old, and she was married. She was definitely married at 15, and she smoked cigarettes all the time. And I remember thinking, what is going on here? So more so, I think people like sneaking off and, making out with somebody you like, things like that were forms of rebellion, but they came down on you so hard for that kind of stuff that most people were just too terrified to do it. They didn't want to have to go through the handling that would occur afterwards because that was very uncomfortable at the same time. But I don't think otherwise, there's not too much.
It's interesting. The demanding schedule of the Sea Org and the fact that everyone is always on post except for 30-minute meal breaks, maybe a 15-minute afternoon break, really kind of limits how much this cool crowd clickiness thing is able to manifest because there's, I mean, I guess to a degree, there was a little bit of this. And maybe it had a little bit to do which Sea Org members were considered the best looking or came from wealthy families or
celebrity families.
Exactly. But because your life is so regimented, like what are the cool kids going to do? Hang out in the corner in the quad at ASHO for 5 minutes before roll call, like before muster? Like there's no real way to act on being cool.
And you
You know,
just can't
maybe
be
if you had a
cool in
car,
that uniform.
yeah, if you came from a rich family and you had a nice car and everyone wanted to carpool with you to the mall on Saturday morning for the 3 hours that you guys had allocated to do laundry, that's where you might be like, oh, that's the cool guy, you know. Um, but yeah, otherwise that's not a huge thing. Uh, I wanted to pull this one up also as an example to everyone else in the live chat. If you want to make a comment that you want me to be very easily see and star, begin it with question like Nerdosaurus Jules did here. Okay, you said everyone is lying to everyone else. So does everyone know everyone else is lying too? Or does everyone think they are the only ones who have to lie about their experiences? Oh, this is a good one.
From my experience, I thought I was the only one that just wasn't living up in all of these different ways. I didn't, because it's something you didn't talk about. You weren't allowed to talk about that. Anything that you were struggling about, definitely if you had doubts about Scientology or thoughts of leaving the Sea organization, you could not talk about that. It's a suppressive act in Scientology to tell people that you want to leave Scientology, that you're leaving Scientology, that you're leaving the Sea organization. And L. Ron Hubbard says that anybody who leaves the Sea organization before they finish their billion-year contract is what he called a degraded being, which is like scum of the earth. It's just like it sounds, degraded being. You're so degraded. But everyone who left the Sea organization, didn't matter what you did, didn't matter what you went on to do afterwards. It's like this scarlet letter that if you're an ex-Sea Org member in that Sea Org community, that you're a degraded being, no matter what. Which they have to say that because they have to justify and make it look like people who leave aren't doing well. That's why they can't maintain connection with anybody who leaves, because they might find out, oh my gosh, they got a job. They're happy. They went to school. I mean, whoa, who knew?
That's right. For the longest time, there was a rule that no ex-Sea Org members, even if they'd gotten back into the good graces and was, paid their debt and actively moving on the bridge, no former Sea Org members could be used in Scientology promotional materials. That used to be a very big rule.
Oh yeah, I got taken out of a few things because I was an ex-Sea Org member where I just happened to be there. Not like they were putting it together, and it was like they find out, they know who you are.
Yeah. They've relaxed on that rule probably because 3/4 of the Scientologists in the world are ex-Sea Org members at this point. Let's see. There's one here. Renby, doesn't the whole knowledge report tattle culture also keep people from really forming cliques? What do you think about this?
I would say so. I saw groups, there were groups that hung together, and especially if you're in the same organization. But like my sister used to hang out with this one girl and they were always getting in trouble together. But that's part of why they don't want you to establish these bonds with people. Because what if that's the person that you have to put them on beans and rice, or you have to send them to the RPF? It's going to be a lot harder to do that if that's somebody who's a good friend of yours. So I often felt like it was relationships, and I don't mean just romantic relationships, just friendships were kind of downplayed. It wasn't something that was so obvious. I remember feeling that like, I don't want so and so to know how close I am to this person in a friendship because I don't want them to say anything about it, especially if you're from different organizations in the hierarchy of levels in Scientology. If you're in way upper management or the religious technology center, you cannot be hanging out with somebody like me who was a steward and worked in the dining room.
That's right. That's right. So this click thing can this is a knife that can cut both ways. So I know Serge Del Mar has said that when he was at Flag, he and Lily Flores and Jonathan DeKevitt had like a pact that they would never write any reports on each other.
Nice.
And so they all knew each other's dirt, but they would never report on each other. But that works right up until it doesn't.
Yeah. Until there's enough pressure on you. And that happens all the time in the Sea Org when they're doing their investigations. When I was pregnant, they do a procedure called rollback, where they're trying to find out where you got the idea, who made it okay that you thought that you could go and get pregnant and have a baby. They
Right.
were completely doing that to women back then. I don't know if they were doing it to their husbands as well, to
Mm.
find out who's spreading this line that it's okay and a good thing to be pregnant and have a child and want a family. That was something that was seen as being absolutely counter to everything that was going on in the Sea Organization and anything like that. They have their ways of investigating that's crazy making, and adds to that where people are just on edge and you're not getting enough sleep often. You're often not getting enough nutrition. You don't have a lot of money to be able to supplement what you're being given from the Sea Org.
Yeah. Anon says the DB label was messed up and the stigma of being ex-Sea Org has definitely diminished. Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing ex-Sea Org members being highlighted as giving, their own prosperity seminars. Rafferty Pendry is married to Hannah Lee, is an example. I mean, he was offloaded from the Sea Org for dry humping Tammy Wallama in the CF files area in the basement of ASHO. And yeah, and now he's got, and that Rafi's younger than me. I'm 43. Rafi's younger than me. Now he's OT8. They have him give these, prosperity seminars. The guy runs like a international marketing company. His YouTube videos get like 6 views, and 5 of those are me. Anyway, I'm just mentioning Rafi because, yeah, I mean, he was XSO. Oh, his dad was Rick Pendry, the guy who in the late 90s became famous for the Criminon stuff in Ensenada and Tijuana.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They were getting books. They were doing Dianetics auditing with inmates.
And they solved all the crime in Mexico by handing out the Way to Happiness booklets.
And Colombia, from what I heard.
Yes. I forgot to congratulate Nora in my chat with her last night. I heard Scientology solved crime in Portland. Nora must be very thankful for that. Thank God.
She's still benefiting from all the good work that they're going out and doing.
Here's a question from Summer Savage. As I'm rewatching season 3 of Leah's Aftermath show, did the bigwigs really think they could tolerate David Miscavige because L. Ron Hubbard was coming back? That seems totally insane to me. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not one of the Sea Org members who thought L. Ron Hubbard was returning. I was shocked when I learned that any Sea Org members thought that L. Ron Hubbard was returning. But apparently, the Sea Org members at the International Management Base in Gilman Hot Springs, California, were told that the old man was coming back 18 or 21 years or so after he dropped his body.
Yeah.
And so, I think the episode that you're referring to, Summer, is an episode where, some of those former Int executives, whether it was Mike Rinder or Tom DeVocht, or I forget who are, maybe Jeff Hawkins, they said, yeah, a lot of those guys like Ray Midoff and Guillaume Leserve and Norman Starkey, that one of the reasons they stay is because they're loyal to L. Ron Hubbard and they think L. Ron Hubbard's coming back. It does seem insane, but the truth is, if L. Ron Hubbard told those guys he was coming back, when you understand what Scientologists believe about what you're able to do when you've reached the highest levels of the bridge, it's not really that crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be totally believable. And the crazy thing too is no one would believe him. And for one, I mean, let's not get it twisted. David Miscavige is not giving up that throne. Let's just say hypothetically that L. Ron Hubbard really did come back in a new lifetime. Maybe he comes back as a woman. How great would that be? And then he goes to David Miscavige like, I am L. Ron Hubbard, and I returned this lifetime as a woman because I hear that they're just going to slay from here on out. David Miscavige is going to be like, no, you are not. Go away. It would never happen.
So yeah, maybe Lizzo is L. Ron Hubbard reincarnated and she just hasn't realized, yeah, she just needs to get into Scientology and have some sessions, get that whole track recall going, and just demand her rightful place on the throne.
Mhm. Yeah, it would be something. But the way it's set up, it's just like it's never gonna happen.
Yeah. Okay, Esperanza. Did you clean your windows with newspaper too? I'm a never in from South Africa. I was told to do it that way, so Elrond wasn't very clever. You would get in trouble for cleaning your windows with anything but newspaper, because that's what L. Ron Hubbard said was the right way to clean windows.
Do you recall what the liquid that was used with the newspaper? I'm curious.
Was it water or ammonia? I think it was just water, but maybe a little bit of ammonia. I can't remember. Who in the live chat remembers? I thought it was just water and newspaper.
Yeah, I don't recall. I don't recall having to do windows. That's one thing I don't think I had to do.
You don't?
No, what windows were you cleaning? Where
I
are all
guess
these
you guys
windows?
didn't have windows in the galley.
No, we didn't have windows in the galley. Or, I mean, I think in one of the dining rooms maybe. But no, I don't remember. I mean, I did a ton of cleaning because I worked in the galley and with the food and all that, and we'd always have to clean up and prep after every meal. But I don't recall cleaning windows. So you guys were doing that at the advanced org across the street?
And at Flag and
Mhm.
the ASHO. I was at ASHO and the advanced org afterwards. But yeah. I mean, honestly, you weren't allowed to use Windex. That would be considered out tech, off
Yeah.
policy.
Yeah, it'd be like
Um,
giving your kid anything, your baby, anything other than the barley formula, which L.
Yes.
Ron Hubbard came up with a formula for the infant formula that you should give to your baby after they're born instead of, breastfeeding or some other type of FDA approved baby formula. And I
That's
did
right.
it. I did it. I totally did it.
My
Totally
little
did it.
brother. So, I mean, by the time my mom got into Scientology, I was 4. So I was not, not having a bottle anymore. But my little brother, who's 6 years younger than me, he was raised on that barley formula stuff. And it would take forever to make. But I remember we would have to
Mhm.
eat the leftover barley as breakfast. And yeah.
Would you eat
Didn't
it
they have
today?
didn't they add corns, like just Caro corn syrup into
Oh, yeah.
that whole
Yeah.
thing?
Corn syrup, if I remember correctly, and maybe somebody in the chat knows, it was corn syrup, barley. You would take barley and you would wrap it in like some kind of muslin sack, and then you would put it in a crock pot or on the stove, and you had to like simmer it for a certain amount of time. But then you would remove it and you would add a certain amount of Caro syrup, and then you would add in your milk of choice. So like I did goat milk back then. So
Mm.
we use that for my son. But I only did it for my son, actually. Well, my daughter got it because she went to a Scientology daycare. So Shelby got the barley formula when she was a baby.
Interesting. Some people are saying in the chat that they thought you added vinegar to the water and the newspaper, but that's possible. I just don't
Oh, yeah,
actually.
you could clean that's how I've cleaned things with vinegar and water too. That does work.
Yeah,
But if L. Ron Hubbard didn't say it does, then don't you go be doing that way.
exactly. Me and Taz, in your off time, did you ever talk about the outside world and wonder what their lives were like?
Not talk about it. I wondered that all the time. All the time. I would see people anytime I went outside or would be I remember sometime I was in a course room where there were actually public people, parishioners. I think it was I forget why, but there were people who were in on the Key to Life course. And so there were people who weren't Sea Org members who were in there, and on break time they would just talk about this or that. And they're not even doing anything too crazy because they're still Scientologists. And just even like I had no idea if they talked about a show, what that show was. I had no pop culture references at all. Especially being a teenager, that was crazy because you're not watching television, reading magazines, newspapers, or anything like that. You're just more isolated and have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. So I'd already had enough exposure to the real world or the outside world that I didn't necessarily like wonder what it was like. Anyone who worked in a regular Class 5 organization directly interfaces with the real world just as much as a non-Scientologist would, really. But I remember being on the buses at Flag, being bussed in early on a Sunday morning, without enough rest, and just looking at the other cars on the street and just kind of having a sinking feeling of like, wow, those guys can go wherever they want and do whatever they want with this entire day. And I will never be able to do that. I remember, I mean, that's a kind of a deep thought to have at the age of 13 or 14, where you're sort of, I'm sort of able to acknowledge the reality of my indentured servitude, that my life was not my own. My schedule was not my own. My decisions were not my own. And that's just the way it was always going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Let's see. Here's one. Neuropsych 93. Question. Is there a system of levels that keep the upper levels separated from each other? I'm not sure what this means. What do you think it means?
It could be the upper levels in the organizations themselves. They did try to keep them separate to a degree. Or do you mean the upper levels on the bridge to total freedom? Because there you get separated out by course room, or when you're doing Scientology auditing, people in that, they called it the Hubbard Guidance Center, which is where you would report. There'd be a person at the counter and you'd let them know you were there. And then you would wait for your turn to go into session with your auditor, because you would be waiting. But mostly everybody in there was doing close to the same thing. They didn't mix. Although at least at the advanced organizations and the smaller one, that wouldn't have been the space. But I think they keep it separate, but not totally sure. Oh, they say yes, upper versus lower. Well, I don't know if you mean as staff members with what your job is, or actual training and things on Scientology.
Yeah.
But
Neuropsych 93. Neuropsych 93. Please retype the entire question as completely as you can, and we'll come back to it, because I'm still not clear on what you mean. Okay. Blake Reed says, do you think extreme perfectionism in Scientology is derived from the fear of losing everything and slowly gaining power over everything and everyone? Derived from the fear of losing everything. Damn, I don't know what you mean, Blake. What do you think?
I think that because that fear of losing everything is part of what drives you. You don't want to be declared a suppressive person, because then you lose all contact with your family. So you want to reach this unobtainable, whether it's your behavior, your personality, how you should be and act. There's almost, I feel like a lot of times in Scientology, you get this false personality that is this, just like, it's just rainbows and unicorns all the time, but mostly as it relates to what they're doing to expand Scientology, what they're doing to raise awareness about Scientology. And that fear of and also in Scientology, to do the higher levels, you need to prove yourself as worthy of receiving the information about Xenu and the body things. You got to prove yourself. So there's this whole thing of showing how much you've contributed and what you've done. And let's not forget that in Scientology, if you do get in trouble and you have to make up the amends for that, make amends for what you did, it's far beyond your normal contributions. So I would say, I think I'm tracking, and I would say, yes, there's just this drive to, I need to do it right, and I need to meet these goals, and I need to meet these targets, and there's no other alternative, because if I don't, I'll get sent to the rehabilitation project force. But the slowly gaining power over everything and everyone, I was never in a position of power. I had no power.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, Dennis Tremblay. Question. Do you know anything about an org in Montreal? I'm going to visit next week and see what I can see. I know that there's an org in Montreal. That's about all I know.
I have no idea. No idea.
Okay, Miss Amber Sunshine says, any ex-Sea Org or public survived crazy X2D? ED audit. What?
Executive
Can you read
director, maybe executive director, auditor, ethics officer, all knew my 2D. So this is the person that Amber was in a relationship with, was beating me and threatening to murder my parents and other family members. Girl, I am so sorry that happened to you. But the question is, any excess or public
Okay,
survived.
people, 2D means boyfriend or girlfriend.
Mhm.
So any ex-SO or public survived a crazy ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. The executive director, the auditor, the ethics officer all knew that my boyfriend was beating me and threatening to murder my parents and other family members. Sounds like you survived. Is that what you're, but like,
It would be you.
yeah, you survived.
Yeah, there are some who didn't.
Some questions answer themselves.
Mhm.
Okay. Let's see. DM. Raffi went to PAC? He was at Flag, I think in CMO. They secretly move people to different bases without a word. People literally just disappear. I didn't even know Raffi had been at Flag, especially in CMO. I know Raffi's brother, David Pendry, works at the Flag Advanced Org. I think he's a cramming officer there. And but it makes I can see by the time I got to PAC, Raffi was the deputy Sea Org recruitment officer at ASHO under Matt DeRyan. Matt ended up being declared a suppressive person for sleeping with his senior, Monet Berenson, who was married to another Sea Org member at the time. So the recruiter and his senior, the Has, were both declared suppressive and kicked out. And then Raffi was kicked out of the Sea Org. Yeah, ASHA was the wild, wild west back in the early 2000s. Okay. Wouldn't Tom Cruise be 100% better being in the Sea Org than a public?
I think he thinks he is a Sea Org member. I wouldn't doubt that there wasn't some kind of honorary Sea Org member status that was given to him because people are instructed, Sea Org members are instructed to treat him as such, which is unusual for somebody who's a public person and not a Sea Org member.
That's right. There is a phrase in Scientology called an honorary Sea Org member. And the definition given in the Scientology dictionary is that if a celebrity wants to join the Sea Org, they're actually not allowed to because they do more good for Scientology as a celebrity, and they can be made an honorary Sea Org member. And John Travolta claims that he is an honorary Sea Org member, and he has a Sea Org ring that he used to wear.
But he doesn't
and
wear
I feel
it
like
anymore.
I know. I feel like Tom Cruise has to be an honorary Sea Org member. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. There's no way that he doesn't think that, even if he didn't get it. I mean, he got the big old, gold plate. So it gets bigger every time. It's like this size, but every time I talk about it, it's this big around his neck.
That's right. Oh, this is a good point here. Scientia. Aren't perfection and standard tech absolutes and therefore unobtainable per L. Ron Hubbard? It's true. L. Ron Hubbard said absolutes are unattainable, but I think he even in the lecture that he gave where he talked about Flag being the mecca of technical perfection, he said absolutes are unattainable except for Flag's technology. So, but it's funny because he's almost making fun of himself when he says that. He's acknowledging that what he's saying is impossible, but we're going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to pretend like it's a joke because it's not a joke.
No, it's dead serious. We're talking about clearing the planet and freeing the beings and all of the body thetans. That's a big responsibility.
Right. Cindy Huot. Your thoughts on the damage William has done with his channel to shut down the building in Los Angeles. Natalie, have you watched any of William Good's Scientology audit channel?
Yes, I've watched quite a bit of it. I love catching up on it.
What are your thoughts on how they actually get them to shut that place down early sometimes?
I'm curious as to, is that really why they're shutting it down? Because sometimes they leave it open and they keep going. It doesn't seem to be consistent, except it does seem like their new tactic is, I feel like they're trying to create a situation that William is stalking. What's that one girl's name? Twilla? Because his recent video, Twilla was acting weird and kept shutting the door, but she was looking around like she was it looked like she was acting and someone might have been filming her, because if she can say that she feels threatened, and she specifically said, stop following me. And before you can get like a restraining order on somebody, you need to be able to tell the police that, no, you did ask them to stop and they did not. So I think they're laying the groundwork for that because nothing else has worked. And even that will somehow flop on them.
Yes. I mean, if we were in an era where all of this stuff wasn't able to be live streamed to the entire world, they would be able to get away with stuff like that. Because I was thinking to myself, Miscavige has to be absolutely furious that those people have not figured out what to do about William and Jessica. And so Twilla or Toucan or Lurch or R2D2 or Sebastian pretending that they're being stalked by William would be an excellent strategy.
Yeah.
But it's not going to work because of the live streaming. It's not going to work. Yeah. And the LAPD just also can't get away with their sort of tyrannical strong arm bullying tactics either because of the live streaming.
Exactly. People are always watching. That's why this is such a game changer when it comes to educating people on the fact that Scientology is a cult and a human trafficking organization. There's no hiding it. They're right there, and they can be there. So I think it's going to get really interesting to see how this develops, because I'm noticing too more other people in the live stream who are there doing the same thing. There's whole bunches of them.
They got a crowd of like 30 people outside the test center on a Thursday night, Friday night. It's really something.
Yeah, there's more people outside definitely than inside.
Bo Beats and the Velvet Elvis Body Thetans. Enjoy our perfectly imperfect world. We love you.
Yes. I have a shirt that says that, perfectly imperfect.
I love it. Random guy, random day. Greetings from Hamburg, Germany. We have a Church of Scientology here in town, and I was wondering if David Miscavige was in there before, and if he was in every org church at least once before. I know he definitely has not been in every org. And also, I don't think he sets foot into Germany or France because there's a higher likelihood that the authorities will slap a pair of handcuffs on him for one reason or another in Germany and France than in many of the other countries. But yeah, thank you for the question, random guy. Okay, Blake Reed. I meant to say there is the stick, there's the carrot, and there's the diamond. It has always felt to me that the whole point of moving up the bridge is to prevent one extreme while pursuing the other. Lose everything or gain everything. Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Yes, you're in search of the diamond, and they can take it all away from you at any moment. I think your last question was whether perfection was the idea of perfection was somehow tied to these things. And I don't know.
There's the demand for it.
Yeah. I feel like the higher you get on the bridge, the more of the lie that you're living, that you're somehow getting closer and closer to perfection. I know that's definitely the impression that was created upon us plebs at the lower ends of the bridge. And that's why it was so disappointing to me to find out that the OT levels were just Xenu and the body thetans and the thetan clusters. Like, what the hell does that have to do with going full OT and skipping the implant station and being cause over life and causatively exteriorizing at will with full perceptions? I'm like, huh? That was what was disappointing to me. All right, let's see. There's a whole bunch here that I've got starred, but Neuropsych 93. Do lower levels Scientologists talk to do lower levels talk to mid-levels, public Scientologists versus celebrities? Neuropsych, I have to ask you to please write in full sentences and paragraphs, because I feel like everything you say could be interpreted 2 or 3 ways. And I want to be able to precisely answer your questions. But I think I do know what you're saying. How would you answer this, Natalie?
I would say that they're allowed to talk to them. But with celebrities are handled a little bit different. And I think that it depends on the celebrity, because in my day, when I would be at the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles, which is where Aaron used to work, and that's where the upper levels of Scientology were delivered in Los Angeles. So they weren't delivered at the Celebrity Center, although I think like Tom Cruise, there might have been exceptions in some ways, I don't know. But not all the Scientologists who are celebrities really behave the same way. Some had, I think stricter rules around them, like Tom Cruise, but like Kirstie Alley would kind of just come and go. And it really wasn't as much of a thing, but some of them, especially with Tom Cruise, it was this whole shut down the elevator, see who he has to possibly walk past and make sure they are acceptable to even be in his presence.
Yeah.
So it was
By
different
the
like
way,
that.
if you're watching live right now on either of our channels, do us a favor, please, and hit that like button. It really seems to help with notifications. We've got a good number of people watching right now.
Yeah, make sure you
Okay,
subscribe to my channel too.
that's right. Oh my God, I never
Yes.
showed anyone, did I? Guys, if you're not already subscribed, let me hide the comment. Oh boy, there it is. If you're not already subscribed to Natalie's channel, you can find her on YouTube at Scientology, Life After a Cult. Natalie's been uploading every day and her videos are awesome. And you've really been kicking butt over there.
It has been fun.
All right, let's see. I saw some other ones here. Me and Taz question. There's a mission 8 kilometers from me. Do missions recruit new people? Well, they're supposed to. That's literally what they're
Yeah.
there for. They are there to get brand new people in. They're not very good at it. I almost don't even count missions these days because there's just so few of them in the entire world. And they're almost every mission is just has like 1 staff member, 2 staff members. They're not even open all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So that is what they're there for, though. Me and Taz, you could probably drop by and find out for yourself just how established or unestablished they are. Like, is there a note on the door that says, call this cell phone number if you ring the bell and someone will come or something?
To ring the bell if you have a pulse and a wallet.
C.O. Bilf. Travolta is definitely an honorary Sea Org member. Kendrick Moxon, too, I've heard.
Oh.
It's funny. So Kendrick Moxon isn't a celebrity. So, like, I don't know why Kendrick Moxon just isn't a Sea Org member. I don't really understand it. Like, why doesn't Scientology have its own in-house Sea Org member attorneys? Maybe it's because they'd rather have the arm's length relationship, perhaps. But
maybe he did
I could
LSD.
see. Maybe he did. Well, Kendrick was also, he used to be in part of the Guardian's office. Wasn't there a rule? Maybe if you're part of the Guardian's office, you're not allowed to be in the Sea Org. Is that possible? Guys, anyone in the live chat who knows?
There was a rule like that because they had to act like nobody who was in the Guardian's office was still around because the Guardian's office they kind of like took the hit on. This was after Mary Sue Hubbard went to jail and all that. And then Scientology had to be all, what? Guardian's office, we don't have that. We got rid of that. Same way they got rid of coerced abortion. Same way they got rid of the Rehabilitation Project Force. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I don't trust anything because that's often what they'll do is it'll be temporary so people aren't so focused on it. And then they just bring it right back.
Yeah. Okay, eat more pizza now. Of course, I have an odd question, but do the Sea Org members get jury duty notices? Do they serve? Asking for a friend. The answer is yes. I served on a jury while in the Sea Org.
Oh, wow.
I didn't just show up for jury duty. I got selected for the jury, and the case lasted for many days. And even when the trial was over, I lied and said that the trial was still going on so I could take some extra days off.
So no one tried to get you to get out of it for jury duty. That is shocking.
Oh, they want you to try to get out of it, but I did everything I could to get picked for that jury.
Yeah. That must have been great, like a vacation from the Sea Org.
Oh, it was amazing.
And you get
I
to
loved
eat
it.
out.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Blake Reed says, what if a bunch of people all got together, claimed to be OT8 and started screaming out the OT8 material?
That they probably wouldn't recognize too much.
Wait, I still don't understand this question. Is it just me tonight? I do not understand the question. You don't have to pretend to be OT8 in order to scream out OT8 material.
I think he's saying, but if they presented themselves
so that
as
they can't
we are
say that,
OT8.
maybe it's so that they can't so that the Scientologists won't say, oh, you just read some squirrel information on the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
So you'd be like, no, I am OT8 and this is the OT8 material.
They wouldn't believe it because no one who is at that level in Scientology would be doing that without them knowing that that person was now gone and out of there.
That's right. That is correct. They just wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, I think the lower level things in Scientology, like the clear cognition, would be more relatable because most people in Scientology and in the Sea Org are never going to do the upper levels. And they're told that what they're hearing is incorrect, that South Park was a squirrel, which that for them, that means altered version
Yeah.
of the higher operating Thetan levels.
Right. Okay, CO Bilf. About honorary Sea Org members, is the honorary part just for the current lifetime? Does Travolta think he has to report to the EPF when he picks up his next body? They don't really think about it that deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like getting the
They
key to
don't.
the city. You're not going to go around with it. Try to open doors. Unless maybe you're Tom Cruise.
Okay, Blake says, what exactly are the missions that Miscavige freaks out over if they're not done immediately? Okay, you're talking about Sea Org missions. So there's a mission which is like a tiny privately owned Church of Scientology. That's like a lower level organization that exists to get people into Scientology. And then there's a Sea Org mission. And that is two or more Sea Org members being sent out on like a task for the crown.
Mhm.
And you're basically, so when you said, what are the missions? A Sea Org mission can be sent out. Basically, if a Sea Org mission is being sent out, it's to bypass whatever staff members were supposed to be handling something and weren't getting it done. And a special mission has to be sent out to do their job for them or to fix some sort of big problem. And Miscavige would not personally usually be running a Sea Org mission. So I feel like, Blake, you might be asking this question based on a specific story that you heard about maybe a particular mission that was sent out that Miscavige had a particular interest in. But otherwise, I don't have like a very specific answer to this question.
And if they show up, if Sea Organization missionaries have a very specific look because they wear their dress uniform.
Mm-hmm.
So if they've got the gold bars, they've got the big gold thing. It's like massively navied out. And they don't tell you that they're coming. So if you're at a Scientology organization and you look out the window and you see two dressed up Sea Org members heading your way, you are in trouble because they are there to bypass you to get done what you are not getting done. In my experience, it's usually been for things like raising money, recruiting people for the Sea Org, building up an organization, recruiting people for staff, or an outright what's called an ethics mission, which is when the shit is really going to fly because they're there to find out what the out ethics is, who the potential trouble sources are, and who the suppressive people are. Did you hear, Aaron? I heard that Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's wife, when she was alive, did a PTS handling, so a potential trouble source handling. Someone was working with her to find out who was suppressing her, who was the suppressive person that was on her lines, and that she named David Miscavige.
I believe that. Is this a PTS handling that would have occurred after she got out of prison, like the latter part of her life? Yes, I have heard that story. I completely believe that.
Yeah, there was an interview that Jeffrey Augustine did with Guy White, who was one of the son-in-laws who was married to one of the Hubbard daughters. And I remember he shared that, or it came up, but it seemed to be some, I don't know if it's urban legend, urban Sea Org legend, or it actually happened, but I could totally see it. And it would explain a lot. She didn't like him at all.
We've got some funny questions in the queue here. 00 Das Hero question: is the Philly Org on Race Street the location that you worked at? Yes, it is 1315 Race Street. It's where the org's been for a long, long time. Okay, Kenda links. If a newbie just investigating during their first session asked if they were free to go and used the word kidnap, would they be able to more easily leave without paying?
Well, you don't start without paying. You have to pay first. So you don't pay after you would get the session. You have to pay for your services up front. So if you're getting your first session, you've already paid for it, unless it's a introductory session, which you would be getting for free. And they'd have no reason to keep you. But if they did, and you yelled kidnap, yeah, they would just let you go. but they might keep you there longer to get you to buy something or do more services. But then you just say, "Hey, I'm not interested. I'm leaving," and you just walk out.
That's right. And okay, so, and if you're talking about a session, an auditing session, this is interesting because it is true that an auditor is not really allowed to let the pre-clear leave the
No,
auditing session before it's done. And yet at the introductory level, it would be a huge flap
exactly.
if an auditor tried to physically restrain a pre-clear from leaving.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But
so nobody should, the scenario that you're describing here should never be a scenario that would ever really come up. Like, it's funny though. Let's say you're in a Dianetic session, an introductory Dianetic session, and the pre-clear tries to leave, but it's like an introductory session. What would you do?
I mean, you'd have to do your best, but I think there are ways to communicate with someone beyond just grabbing onto them and being like, "No, you can't leave." Just like, "Hey, let's take a look at this." But then we're talking about Scientology, so who the hell knows what they would actually
Yeah.
do? I've not heard of that happening with people new to Scientology, and I think that most or they could always just end the session quickly. You can't keep somebody there against their own determinism at that level. At other
Yeah.
levels, hell yeah, they would hold you down in that chair. They're trained to hold you down in that chair and get you
Yeah.
back in that chair. There are drills that auditors in Scientology do so that they can physically handle you to stay in that chair.
Yeah. Okay, Darren Smith says, Rick, this is Kendrick Moxon, had LSD, so he cannot be in the Sea
Mhm.
Org. Some Sea Org members have law degrees, but they use outside attorneys to create a layer of separation. And John C. says they do have their own lawyers. Helena Cobrin is a lawyer at Flag. She
Ah,
may be a lawyer, John C., but does she actually like
practice.
wear the hat of attorney? Like, does she file any motions or lawsuits, or does she send any cease and desist letters? Like, I'm familiar with the name Helena Cobrin, but I just I don't know if she is that her post? Is her post counsel? I'd be curious to know. Okay, this is a funny one. OBG Foster. Why squirrel and not some sea creature like an enemy?
I don't know. I don't know the origin of where that came from with the squirrel. Why squirrels are getting a bad rap. Why Karens? I don't know how that name got picked. One too many Karens did something. L. Ron Hubbard might have some previous traumatic incident involving squirrels that was really bad. So when he decided to come up with the terminology for it, that squirrel right there. But if he was deathly afraid of wolves, maybe it was in that. You went wolf. But that sounds kind of
Yeah,
cool.
what do we think squirrels ever did to L. Ron Hubbard to get such a bad reputation?
You gotta wonder. You gotta wonder. And
They're
again,
so
I don't know the
cute,
backstory. Yeah. Maybe because
you
they
know.
bounce around, they do their own thing. I don't know.
Maybe
But
because L.
they're
Ron Hubbard
dedicated.
was such a homophobe and squirrels love nuts.
It could be. You just don't know with him. It's the kind of question no one would ever ask.
He never explained why he used the word squirrel to as an insult for people who alter Scientology. I love
Yeah,
this
not that
question.
I'm aware of. Unless maybe there could be some archaic definition
Hold
of
on.
squirrel or something in the origin of the word that makes it make sense. I don't know.
Let's see. Blake, do you think Miscavige sends missions down to help him reach things off of the refrigerator?
I'm sure it's all
Yes.
laid out for him.
Yeah. Okay, Kazri. Have either of you followed up with Jamie Mustard about getting medical treatment for post-traumatic stress injury? Also, I'm live daily. Have you watched my channel?
I have not on either yet. I did. Hey, wait a minute. I ordered the book, but I don't think I got it now that I think about it. I need to track that down. Oh, it's because I ordered it on Audible, but I need to listen to it. So I haven't yet. I wanted to get through the book. And I've
Yeah.
not watched your channel, but we'll have to check it out.
Yeah. I'm not looking to get medical treatment for post-traumatic stress injury, so there's been no follow-up. And Kazri, I haven't seen your channel. Shoot me a link at growingupinscientology@gmail.com. Okay, let's see. I have not been keeping up on the live chat, so I'm going to look for other ones here. But was there more? Did we? I have the document that you sent me with kind of your outline for the things that you
My
want to discuss.
outline on account of being a
thing.
perfectionist.
That's right. But did we discuss everything on that
Yeah,
subject that you
yeah.
wanted to discuss?
No, we did, and then some. The whole idea, I think it's something
Okay.
that whether you've never been in Scientology or not, if you're relating to these things, you might want to take a closer look at it, because some of the solutions for it and way of breaking free from that seemed more just changing certain behaviors. And I know, like I said, like it's helped me to just let things go sometime and just be a little bit more of a slacker. But then it's not a slacker, because even my slacker self gets quite a bit done. But sometimes, like I have whole days. This is actually part of what I'm doing, Aaron. I will at least 3 times a month, maybe 4. I have entire days where I do nothing except what I feel like. Maybe I watch shows, listen to books. If I feel like doing something, I'll do it. But if I don't feel like doing anything, I do nothing. And it's amazing and it's glorious. It's the best thing ever, doing nothing. I feel like
it's
my
funny
goal
for
in
me
life.
because I've set myself this goal of uploading at least one thing every day.
Mhm.
There's whenever I wake up, there's always if I want to have a total lazy day, there's still that little bit of anxiety that I have of like, but I've got to do some video. And but you see, that's just something I've created for myself. I'm creating my own anxiety on that.
Yeah. And there is such thing as a work ethic. I think it's just more being okay with it. Like you went out of town when you traveled and you weren't doing videos.
It drives me crazy though. I was going crazy the whole time.
I get that. I completely get that.
Like I'm traveling tomorrow, and then I'm going to be out of town on New Year's Eve. So I'm traveling tomorrow to the West Coast, and then I'm there for a day, and then I'm traveling back the next day, and I get all anxious about what videos am I going to be able to do. But these are good problems. These are first world problems, really. Oh, here's something interesting. Tracy Sensata. My dad grew up in the same era as L. Ron Hubbard, and weird things or people were called squirrels.
Oh.
So it could be from that.
Yeah, that would make total sense, that it was just an archaic definition of the word. Totally. Huh.
Well, guys, I know we're at the end of the video here, but if you're watching right now and you haven't hit that like button, please do us a favor and hit that like button. It does actually help. This has been great. I can't believe we're 90 minutes into this thing. The time goes by so fast when we do these.
Yes. And make sure you head
Absolutely.
over to Scientology Life After a Cult and subscribe to my channel.
That's right. Go subscribe to Natalie's channel, Scientology Life After a Cult. She's doing live streams every single day. And yeah, thanks for hanging out with us this evening, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you
questions.
as always to everyone who watches until the very end. And we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe